physician friend of mine had a series of scary dreams one night, beginning with a dream about a serial killer. The kind of dream that would make you want to get up and check to make sure your doors are locked. But it got worse after that. The next dream was about having cancer in her right breast. It was quite a shock, and when she woke up, she checked to see if she had any suspicious lumps, didn't find any. But she still went for a mammogram later that day. Unfortunately, as predicted by the dream, the mammogram showed a cancer in her right breast. Similar to this example, where you see a round white cancer in the center of a relatively dark breast. In this particular type of breast, where the glandular tissue is predominantly replaced by dark fat, cancers are relatively easy to detect. And this will become an important point later in the talk. So a question for the audience: has anybody else ever had a dream of any kind that later came true? I see a lot of hands going up, and it's not surprising. It's a relatively common occurrence, although often hard to explain. Next question: how many people in the audience know who Asclepius was in ancient Greece? I see a few hands going up. I'm sure you all recognize the rod of Asclepius, which is one of the symbols of modern medicine. And you can see the single snake coiled around the rod at the base of the statue from ancient Greece, where Asclepius was the god of medicine and healing. People with illnesses would go on a pilgrimage to one of the Asclepian temples to stay overnight in hopes of having a dream that would guide them in their healing process. The next morning they would get up, share the dream with the priest who would help them interpret the dream and perhaps prescribe some sort of remedy for their illness. Now, it's particularly ironic that the rod of Asclepius would be the symbol of modern medicine because dreams have essentially no role in the diagnosis of illness in today's medicine, which is largely focused on high-tech methods. Now, speaking of high-tech, why would an academic radiologist like myself be so interested in the study of dreams? I'm actually an academic holistic radiologist. Many people think that sounds like an oxymoron. But let me explain. From an academic perspective, I published one of the very first papers on MRI of the knee in the 80s before MRI was widely accepted. It was a small pilot study of 20 patients just to prove to our orthopedic surgeons that we could actually see the meniscal tears before they found them at surgery. More larger studies were required before the value of MRI of the knee was finally proven. I published one of those larger studies on MRI of the shoulder a few years later, and now years later, MRI is pretty much accepted as the gold standard for diagnosis of all kinds of joint diseases. Now, from a holistic perspective, I discovered that many of my patients were claustrophobic in the MRI machine. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. So I learned hypnosis to offer them an alternative to being sedated with drugs. Now, my career in research a couple of decades later took a strange turn into the world of dreams, as if I was following in the footsteps of those Asclepian pilgrims. 3 of my close friends had dreams that warned them of breast cancer. If it had just been the first one that I told you about, I could just dismiss that as a coincidence. But when there were actually 3, and 2 of them were in fact scientists, I had to take it more seriously. Diane, a cardiac physiologist, had a vivid, more real than real dream one night of being in an operating room having surgery for breast cancer by a woman surgeon. It was a startling dream. She didn't have any symptoms, but went to her doctor and got a mammogram ordered. Now, her mammogram was actually interpreted as normal, but you can see in this breast, which has a lot of dense white glandular tissue in it, it'd be harder to find a small breast cancer. So she was convinced of the importance of the warning in the dream, so she adamantly asked for an ultrasound. And the radiologist actually refused, saying, "There's no palpable lump, we don't see it on the mammogram, I wouldn't know where to do the ultrasound." So she pointed to a place on her breast and said, "Do it here." And she wouldn't leave the department until the ultrasound was done. So the radiologist reluctantly put the ultrasound probe right where she requested and was shocked to find a small cancer deep in the breast and turned white as a ghost and said, "Well, how did you know it was there?" "I was shown it in a dream," was her response. Now that amazed me, But even more amazing, a month later, she had surgery for her breast cancer by a woman surgeon who she'd never met before, but she recognized her from the dream. So Diane was very fortunate that she was so persistent about requesting the ultrasound and guided by the dream. Now, my next friend, Sonia Lee Shield, was not as fortunate. She also had a warning dream about cancer, about breast cancer, went to her doctor, who totally dismissed the dream, didn't even order a mammogram, and even though she had some vague symptoms, she described that as a devastating mistake, because a year later she was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer and died a year or so after that. So I dedicate all my talks to Sonia's memory, because her tale is truly a cautionary one that I want everyone to know about. Now, with these three cases, as a researcher, I became curious as to whether anybody else had ever heard of this phenomenon, because I actually hadn't. So I did a literature search on breast cancer and dreams, found absolutely nothing in the medical literature, which is probably not surprising. I did find this case report in the nursing literature in 1996 by Carolyn Kinney, who's actually a professor of nursing, who was woken up by a commanding dream voice saying, "Go get your mammogram now, do not delay." She didn't have any symptoms, but she took the advice, went and had the mammogram, found the cancer, had surgery, and wrote this paper about it, way ahead of her time. And now, I couldn't find any more scientific references, but I did find this book by Wanda Birch. Has a very dreamlike quality to the cover, and Wanda had an incredible series of dreams, really highlighted by her deceased father coming, accompanied by a white-coated physician, and shouting at her and pointing, "You've got breast cancer. Go get your mammogram now. Don't delay." And she didn't have any symptoms. Again, went to her doctor, had both a mammogram and an ultrasound, and neither one of them found the cancer. Fortunately, she found an open-minded surgeon, Dr. Barlin, who thought her dreams were compelling. But he said, "Look, the studies don't show me where to biopsy, so, what am I supposed to do? Did the dream show you where the cancer was?" And when Wanda said, in fact, it had, he got a twinkle in his eye and said, pulled out a very important special high-tech instrument, this magic marker. Okay, so the magic marker, obviously not a high-tech instrument, but Wanda took the marker and put a dot on her breast. And really, he then prepared the biopsy and put a needle right through the dot, hit hard cancer deep in the breast. And he took her to surgery and found an aggressive breast cancer. And so she's very fortunate to have such an open-minded doctor. She required both surgery and chemo. Later, when she had recovered, she went to a breast cancer support group near her home in New York and told her story to the women there, and then asked, did any of them have any warning dreams? And 10 out of 19 women actually reported having a warning dream. I was shocked when I heard a number like that. I thought, there's a lot more women out there who have had these kind of dreams. So I got inspired to do a research project, and I created a scientific survey with 19 yes or no questions about dreams. And I used my social networking connections and also the International Association for the Study of Dreams to get the word out about the study. It was also sponsored by Dreams Cloud, an international social networking site for dreams, and they recommend keeping your dream diary on your smartphone. And now, the 18 women responded to the questionnaire from around the world, and this paper was published in the May-June issue of Explore, which is a peer-reviewed journal. It's a small pilot study, somewhat similar to my MRI of the knee study, really just to find out more about what these warning dreams are like. More larger studies are going to be needed before we really know the value of a warning dream. So right now we just focused on the words that the dreamers use to describe their dreams. And from most common to least common, almost all of them had a sense of conviction about the importance of the dream, that they needed to take some action on it. Almost as many, more than 80%, said it was more vivid or real than an ordinary dream. 70% said there was a sense of threat or dread or menace in the dream. And then slightly less than half, the actual words cancer or tumor were used in the dream. And then about 39% said there was a sense of physical contact with the dream, that either the dreamer's hand touched the breast or a guide in the dream touched their breast. So these results give us a little bit better idea of what a warning dream is like. They also raise one interesting question about the possible mechanism of how information would get transferred from the body into a dream. So thought of three possibilities. One is the women actually had some symptoms that they were ignoring or denying, and it got manifested in the dream. Second would be there's some subtle physiologic signaling that goes on. They didn't have any symptoms they were aware of, but somehow the subconscious picked it up and turned it into a dream. And finally, there'd be some intuitive process that we really don't understand transferring the information directly to the dream. So regardless of the mechanism, the good news is all 18 women who answered the survey are all still alive, although a few of them have had recurrences. One of the women who had recurrences is Kat O'Keefe Canavas. She's actually had 2 recurrences, multiple surgeries, chemotherapy, the whole works, guided the whole way with her dreams. Now her dreams, as depicted on the cover of her book, have a very through-the-looking glass quality to them. They're very unusual dreams. They're probably the most unusual in the study. She'd be having an ordinary dream, like I know you've all had, and then it would freeze like a computer screen, and I know you hate when that happens. And then an annoying pop-up window would appear. Hate that too. But through her pop-up window would step a hooded robe monk, complete with a rope belt, leather sandals, the whole works, and point at her and say, tell her exactly what to do. You've got cancer. Go get a mammogram now. Do not delay. Do not even wait for an appointment. Now, she was very fortunate to have such persistent guides because her cancers were pretty hard to find on the mammography and even ultrasound, sometimes requiring an MRI scan. The good news is she's alive and well over 10 years later, and we're actually working on a new book together on dreams that can save your life. And we're collecting dreams from all over the world of various different types of cancers, including men with prostate cancer, lung cancer, brain tumors. I only have time to share one of those examples with you today. And it's from a close friend of mine, Ann Charles, who's a retired MRI technologist. And she's actually here in the audience with us today. And her dream was a very puzzling one, because she had a dream about giving birth. And being a postmenopausal woman, it didn't seem possible. So she came up with 2 possible interpretations. One a light one and one a dark one is represented by the slide. The light one would be it was just a metaphor for some creative process she was giving birth to, which actually made sense because she's a very creative artist, and that was probably the most likely explanation. Or she could have a problem in her uterus. So like an experienced dreamer, she knew to ask for a clarifying dream the next night. This is a simple thing to do. You just write a question in your dream diary that you want an answer to the next morning. She got an immediate answer on the first dream that night, which was being taken to a graveyard in Ireland. Shown some headstones surrounded by daisies, and hearing the dream message. If you don't take any action on that warning dream last night, you're going to be pushing up these daisies soon. So she took that seriously, even though she had no symptoms, went to her gynecologist, who also found the dream pretty impressive, and ordered an ultrasound, which showed a uterine cancer. And she had successful surgery and is here with us today and is doing fine. So good idea to pay attention to those warning dreams. Now, Ann's story brings up a couple interesting research questions we don't have answers to yet. How do you tell a metaphorical dream from a dream of a real illness? That's one. The next question, how do you tell a warning dream of a benign tumor from a malignant tumor? Now, the good news is I'm in conversation with some of my academic, holistic breast radiology friends about designing a research project that'll get answers to some of those questions. So, in conclusion, I highly recommend keeping a dream diary. There's no downside to it. You may get insights into other things other than your health. It'll help you remember your dreams and pay attention to any warnings you might get. Particularly important for women who are confused by the current conflicting guidelines about screening mammography. Are you supposed to start your mammograms at age 40 or age 50? And if you decide to start at 50, and you have a warning dream when you're 45, you better get it checked out sooner. So the bottom line is, I don't want to hear any more stories like Sonia Lee Shields, but I want to hear more stories like Wanda and Katz. So remember to keep a dream diary. If you get a warning dream, share it with your doctor. And to make sure your doctor takes it seriously, you can give him give your doctor a copy of my paper. And it's a beginning. So remember that keeping a dream diary is a simple but important practice because it could save your life. I think that's an idea worth spreading. Thank you.